Hello, 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 and welcome to this edition of the Jolly Heretic. Now then, drinkers at the Jolly Heretic Public House, I have such a special guest for you today, and that special guest is Hugh on the Offensive. And Hugh and I first met, it must have been about a year and a half ago. And that was jolly good fun, and we went for a few beers together at a pub somewhere in Lancashire, and here we are again, and it's a pleasure to have you on here. And so while I sign into the old entropy, I will ask Hugh to introduce himself. Hugh, over to you.
Okay, this is unusual, just taking over someone else's channel. Hello everyone, I'm Hugh on the Offensive, as you can see. Got a YouTube channel. I live in Vietnam. I'm a nationalist, and I don't know much what else I can tell you about. I've been online for a couple of years, and I met Dustin. Was it the Patriotic Alternative, Ed? Is that well? That's what it was. And,
I believe it was. Yes, right.
Do we say patriotic in England or patriotic?
I say patriotic, but there's an encroachment of the word patriotic, which I'm not in favour of.
Well, I live in an international environment surrounded by expats, so mostly Americans. So I always forget which one is which. Anyway, Patriotic Alternative Conference, which was great, actually. That was a good crack. I recommend these conferences to people who are fed up of the gaslighting that's all around us all the time, of being told you're a conspiracy theorist, of being told that you're wrong and you're insane and you're dumb. You can go to a conference like that and meet regular people and enjoy yourself and speak freely.
Yes, you don't have to worry. Well, you have to worry that there might be a spy, but otherwise you don't have to worry. That you can realise that it's when they say that these people that are involved in nationalism are all knuckle draggers and stupid and whatever. You realise no, they're not. No, there's some sort of quite upper middle class tasty girls at this conference. So you are postgraduates, or
That is true. That's there as well. Yeah, but it's so refreshing to just be. I mean, almost every dinner party and drinks event you go to and stuff, you've got to be so polite. And it's not about politeness. It's about the fact that you can't have a real conversation with someone. Just a memory pops into my head of chatting to a bloke who was a friend of my parents. And this is the run up to the 2016 election. He said, I think Hillary should win. It's about time a woman ran things, isn't it? Like this. And I just thought, you're such a fucking dullard. I really want to be rude to you. I want to just no, actually, that's the worst argument I've ever heard to make someone the most powerful, supposedly the most powerful position in the world. Just hand it to them, vagina. That's my reasoning. So it's so nice when you go to a nationalist conference and you just go, the JQ's legit, and they go, yeah, and then you just have a chat. It's nice.
Well, yes, and there's what I like about it. Not also that the London Conference of Intelligence as well is you don't have to fear an argument with an irrational person. That's almost certainly not going to happen. You don't have to fear fallacies such as appeal to emotion or appeal to consequences or. Just
some univariant like conspiracy theory of the police must be racist because black plus this statistic, therefore, and we're here again.
If you talk about group differences in IQ, who's done the IQ tests? What, racists? So who,
or IQ isn't real. Or I had a bloke from Extinction Rebellion call me up. And he's an old friend, and I've known him for years. And he was, "What's with the hate speech on your channel, Hugh? What's with the hate?" And I thought, what's with you using these Orwellian terms? What do you even mean? What's with the hate? And he had problems with me not being fond enough of homosexuality or something. And I thought, I've never done anything mean to a gay person ever. I just don't believe in promoting it and making it mainstream in society. I'm not on board with this. A gay marriage is equivalent to a straight marriage. I'm not on board with that. I think that's bullshit. Because of that, I'm a hater. I've
been invited to a party tomorrow night, and I was pre-warned that look, Ed, the person whose party is worried that you may have an argument with one of the other people that's going to be there. She's American, and she's very pro-Trump. And I was like, right,
she's very anti-Trump, you mean?
Anti-Trump, yeah. Tell me the name of the person at the party that I should avoid and shun. Just let me know. And he's like, okay, this is the person's name. And I was like, okay, thank you. And then I went into Facebook and discovered she's like an artist and does like left-wing art. I was like, okay, all right, so I'll avoid her. That's that. Okay, so but I like the way that I have to be forewarned about these things, and that's the thing. At the Patriotic Alternative or London Compass on Intelligence or things like that, that issue just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, and it exists every other aspect of life. I was once at a schizophrenia conference, and there was a particular load of presentations on the genetics of schizophrenia, and schizophrenia is strongly genetic. And there was this group of people outside. Literally wouldn't go into the room outside on the balcony. Wouldn't go in because they don't believe schizophrenia is all to do with poverty, and it's all to do with environmental conditions and things like this, which is empirically not true. But and they were really angry, bitter people, and that's the thing that it's one way, and there's been research on this. It's one way. We don't mind being around people that strongly disagree with us. I'm perfectly happy to have friends that vote for Hillary Clinton or who vote for Jeremy Corbyn or whatever. But a lot of those people, not all, but a lot of those people have such a strong sense of moral disgust that they find it difficult to be friends with someone that disagrees.
It's funny because we're the ones who are meant to have the disgust reflex, right? We're meant to have that programmed in there, and I think it is there somewhere. Maybe more than lefties, because lefties will see a transgender boy dancing on stage in a gay bar and think it's liberatory performance art, and whereas we're repulsed by that, but they are repulsed by us, and the spite is absolutely there. I think it really ruins their movies when it could just be a fun movie, but they've got to make a moral point to shit on tradition and to shit on everything that's come before. They can't even adopt even the slightest notes of sort of the classical guidelines that were there. So it's completely rootless nonsense that they produce now. I notice that a lot when I watch films and TV shows. They really mess them up with the messaging, not because it's wrong to put in political messaging or to make something left wing or something. I'm not against that, but it's the spite that's there which takes them off track from let's just make something entertaining and good.
CC says Hugh is lagging a bit. Hugh may well be lagging a bit. I should emphasize that Hugh is Vietnam. So it's Vietnam.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you were a minute ago, not so much now, but a minute ago you were. And somebody has said, do I upload these streams? I do. This, if you just started watching it late or something, this will be taken down the moment it's finished, and it will be put on BitChute. And please subscribe over at BitChute. The home of free speech. But yeah, I agree. I mean, for example, I was watching The Crown with my wife. My wife is, like a lot of Finnish people, is a big fan of The Crown on Netflix. And I don't think it's that bad. And I can't believe that the people that are making this are particularly politically correct or whatever. I think they feel under pressure to do PC things. So the way that 1980s, the way that Britain is represented now, if it's something that's about now, you'd think it was about 50% non-white or more. That's how it's represented. If you have something contemporary, something that's made now, like Dr. Foster or something that's set now. So if something's set in the 80s, it seems to me they make it like it really is now. So it gives you the impression that it's whatever 15% non-white or whatever, whereas the reality was in the 1980s it was about 5% non-white. And those people,
even that much. I think it was less, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's about maybe 4%, whatever. But and those people were overwhelmingly children. They weren't in positions of power or anything like that. And I remember that on the thing last night, they have a thing where I was watching with my wife. The Queen calls Charles and Diana into her study and says, "Oh, you're going to Australia. Here's Sir Sringadir Patel. He's going to tell you about how fascinating Australia is." And that actor, who's Indian, of course, says about 2 lines, and then that's it. So there was no point to it. It wasn't necessary for the plot. It didn't help in any way. The only point was so they couldn't be told, "Oh, you don't have any non-white people with any lines in this particular episode of The Crown." Clearly, that was for them. And that's absolutely, and it's the terrible thing. It's okay. They can't say it's a fiction. It's a rewriting of history. And what's the point? The only point I can think of to rewrite history like that is to gaslight people and to mess around with their morale, to mess around with them mentally, to make them think they've gone mad, to make them think the past wasn't like that, like they remember it as being. And I think that's going. Like, you see,
well, I feel like those videos of London from the 1920s, 1930s, even 1960s, they'll find a way to demote them in the algorithms, because you see the comments and it's just, never forget what they've taken from us, etc., etc. People look at it and they recognize that, wow, it was clean back then, and very few people are obese, and there aren't, a lot of comments about where's the knife crime, where's the threat, where's the alienation there. You can imagine there being community. People used to ride horses in the parks, and there were open markets in the streets where people would barter for food and things, and it just looks like a big village with grander buildings. That's what London used to look like, and of course everybody is English, or almost everybody, and yeah, it feels safe, welcoming, polite, tidy, organized, completely non-threatening, and I feel like those videos are almost worth 1,000 nationalist speeches, because you can just see it and it's undeniable, and nobody can watch it without feeling that it was surely better back then, and that something's been destroyed, something's been corrupted.
It had a sense of home, a sense that it was a home, and that you were at home, and that, because that's what people like. People like being with people that are genetically similar to them. And that's another good thing about these conferences we were mentioning earlier. There's no, that people like that. They're adapted to that. They're evolved to that, and it makes them feel comfortable, and it makes them feel happy. It's what we are. It's the natural environment. And if you deviate from that, if you deviate from what we're evolved to, we become unhappy. It's like trying to get my cat to drive a car or something. If I try to make her learn to drive the car, she doesn't like it. They're not evolved like this, with their arms like this, and they don't like it. And that's what it's sort of done to us. I mean, there are some very small, positive sides to it. Let's not be overly nostalgic. When I used to go on holiday as a kid to some parts of Britain that were completely, you couldn't even get curry. And I found that, you can't even get curry. But that's not a reason to sell out a nation, of course. But it's
the food. Think of the restaurant.
Yeah, the balance.
Think of the restaurant. It's wonderful array.
Somewhere like Winchester, it's like 97% white, and there's a few curries places, whatever. So there's all the benefits of multiculturalism in terms of the diversity of food and restaurants and things like that. But there's none of the downsides at all.
Yeah, it's funny that a place like Bristol, which is 86% white, is Extinction Rebellion ground zero, and the mind virus has really set root there. They are all radical egalitarians. Everyone's just basically the same. Replace this bit of the population with that, and every lefty platitude that you can think of is
well, like these people that are brought up in the countryside, they have never experienced the negative dimensions of multiculturalism, so they romanticize it. I remember that there was this guy from Guildford who lived in Oulu 15 years ago, when it was just totally white, no question of anybody not white. Thank you, Rowan Cale. And he was, Oulu should be more multicultural and all this crap. And then he went back to living Guildford, i.e., one of the whitest and least multicultural places in England. And when I criticised him about this, he said, "Oh well, yeah, that's a cheap low blow to say that I'm a hypocrite because I'm living in Guildford. Guildford's only like 40 minutes on the train from London, or all the multiculturalism." And I was like, yes, that's the point. You get all the good bits of multiculturalism by being able to go to London for the day and have a nice curry or something, or whatever you want to do, without any of the downsides. That's the point. And
the Extinction Rebellion guy I was telling you about, who called me up to say I'm a hater, he used to live in Hackney, and he left. And I said, "Oh, so you left Hackney and now you live in Bristol? How fascinating! Well, why the change? Do tell." And he said that he couldn't find a community in Hackney. That's what he said.
Really? Because I have to say, you say what you like about EastEnders. I mean, people from the East End, I mean, they'd cut your fucking throat. But there was definitely a sense of community. There's no question about that.
Hackney is Diane Abbott's area now.
That's Stoke Newington,
isn't it? Yeah, I thought Hackney was very black.
It is very black, but it's becoming less so. It's gentrifying. So I know. I was in Hackney in 2011. I had a Nigerian friend. I was literally there during the riots. Literally, they were happening outside the window. And a Nigerian friend of mine lives in Dalston, which is a sub area of Hackney. And then there was these friends of mine from Durham University who were, sort of left-wing posh people who also lived in Hackney, and I made my way to see them. And of course, they have moved out of Hackney now. They've got a child, and they live in like some gentrifying area in whatever it is, So what's it called now? I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, so anyway, hello everybody, welcome to the Jolly Heretic. Now here's the situation. I've already had one question for our esteemed guest here, survived on the offensive. And if you have any other questions for everyone from Cheeky Pop, hello madam, also on the offensive, then do send them in. I have a large number of questions from you from Monday, including a very interesting question on tape length, which I will be looking at in some detail and which I have researched. We'll be looking at tape length later. But I will be prioritizing the questions for Hugh. And for the first sort of half of the show, Hugh and I are going to have a bit of a chin wag. And for the second half, then we will look at the old super chats, which you're very kindly sending in. If you would like to send in a super chat, you can do so at the link below on Entropy. Or you can do so through YouTube. As you know, we are an online public house. And we meet on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. UK time. And I have my Kentish ale here. So cheers. Cheers,
everyone. I looked it up. Diane Abbott's constituency is North Hackney and Stoke Newington. Okay, so there we go. Right. Yeah, I think she gets about 87% of the vote. I think that was the last time. She got about 87% of the vote. Real sort of, Pol Pot numbers there. She must be very happy with that. I wonder what could be behind it.
There might be things that make her unhappy, such as having a son who's completely insane and tried to kill her.
Yeah, he's out of hand, right? Didn't he attack a police officer as well?
He attacked a police officer.
Or resisted arrest.
Attacked her. He had to ring the police. She had to ring the police on him. This was all happening during that election in last year, when she was it the election before that, when she was all confused and getting her maths wrong and stuff, and it turns out she's under the pressure of having a son that's gone completely mad.
Yeah, egalitarian principles dictate that he would be a well-adjusted, contributing member of his community, given that he went to one of the best schools in the country and was raised in an affluent household with an influential mother, a woman in power, and so on and so forth. How could this be?
How could he have schizophrenia? Yeah, what factors could arise to contribute to a person who is the son of a very wealthy and affluent mother, who rabidly promotes comprehensive education and is anti-private education, but then sends her son to a private school saying, and I quote, "We Jamaican mothers will go to the wall for our children," which is an interesting remark, because if someone had said, "We white English mothers will go to the wall for our children," then somebody might have criticised them for saying that. She gets away with saying that because she's black. And then it turns out that she has a schizophrenic son. Heritability of schizophrenia very high. Polygenic, so lots of genes together. Two Afro-British parents who marry, and they have a schizophrenic son. So you can see how these kinds of things occur. So yes, it does raise certain questions. Anyway, speaking of these kinds of things, so Hugh and I first met anyway, I should say, for those who aren't familiar with it, in Lancashire some time ago. And he interviewed me actually for his channel, which has got various interesting videos on it if you want to go and have a look, such as On the Folly of Empire. That's one of his. And it's interesting how if you go back about 4 years, they get like 200,000 hits. But then the ones that are more recent get about 20,000. I wonder why. I started too late, I'm afraid. Anyway, Hugh has various hobbies, but he
did well though. That interview got about 25,000 views so far, and I do recommend everyone to go and watch it. It's a good interview. You performed very well, and you look great. You've got your cravat. You're sitting down, but for some reason your jacket is buttoned up. And your shirt's too small. You look great. You look fantastic. It's very Jolly Heretic.
I packed in a hurry, and I realised that my shirt was too small.
Yeah.
It was an old school shirt, I think. I picked up, rather than the new white shirt, I picked up the school shirt from my wardrobe at my home, in my parents' home. And
oh, go on, sorry.
Yes, you can what?
Yeah, I've been traveling for almost 30 hours by the time that I gave that interview. I remember I said, what did I say? I messed up a bunch of words. I edited them out later. so I didn't look like a total buffoon. But I could hardly speak to you. I was so tired. The fatigue. You were like, let's just do it. Let's do it now, Hugh. It'll be fine. And I thought,
oh, I remember that. Right. Yeah. I remember coming to your door and knocking on the door, and you obviously asleep. And at the agreed interview time, you said, I said, let's just do it. And you were like, oh yeah, in a minute. And then I sort of hung around my room for a bit, and then we did the interview, and then went to the pub. But and I kept tripping over that lady. I kept accidentally tripping her over. But yeah, that was good fun. But one of the things that you told me was, of course, that you live in Vietnam. So yeah. I'm interested to know how did you end up in Vietnam, and how is that as a sort of place? Is there other things that we nationalists or nationalistic types can learn from Vietnam? What's the situation?
The things we could learn. I wouldn't encourage a nationalist to go live there. I moved here when I was a lefty, basically implicit lefty, not politically engaged. And what do you call it? Planted roots. What's the bloody expression, Dustin? Help me out. Sowed roots, whatever.
Sowed your seed. Sowed your seed in a Vietnamese lady.
Well, all of this happened before I was based and red pilled. So, but yes, from Vietnam as a country itself, you can definitely learn a lot. It's not perfect. It's not like everything here works well, but it is, it's a de facto ethno state. I think that immigrants probably make up less than 0.1% of the total population. They've got about 90 million people. For people who don't know where it is geographically, it's just below China. So China is on their northern border. China colonized this country, ruled it for about 1,000 years. They kicked them out. The French came in, ruled it for about almost 100 years. They kicked them out. The Americans came in, not really colonizers. Yeah, sort of meddling, imperialism more than colonization. They kicked them out as well. Japanese tried it. They kicked them out. So they've got this long history of being very nationalistic. They're very collectivist in their mindset as well, not just from their history of like teaming together and recognizing that that's how you win. When you're a smaller force, you team together. They always adopted the Fabian strategy to fight off these much bigger, much more technologically advanced armies, which is basically guerrilla warfare tactics and playing sneaky. But some of the battle stories are incredible. Some of the things they used to set up and how they lure the enemy into their traps. Really, really good stuff. If you're interested in that kind of thing, battle history, like look up Dien Bien Phu and look up the
Americans just couldn't win, could they? It was just jungle warfare, and it was impossible for them to.
They had some. There's some quote from Ho Chi Minh, who's known as the big communist leader, right? He's on the money. I will show you a picture of him. Here we go. Here's Ho Chi Minh. All right, that's the guy. He's known as the big communist guy, but I think he just saw communism as a way to defeat colonizers. He was adopting all sorts of different political ideologies throughout his life. He traveled to America, he traveled to France, he studied in Paris for a bit, met some radicals there, went to China, learned a bit more about communism, and just thought, this is really galvanizing people out here. And the way they were doing it in China, it didn't conflict with Confucianism. So it was sort of like hierarchical, traditional. I know they had the shaming sessions and all of the what do they call struggle sessions and tearing down monasteries and things. But he felt like he could adapt it, bring it to Vietnam, get the proles energized, get them to fight back. And it works. I don't think he was particularly committed to, collectivized farming or anything like that. Anyway, I went off topic there. What was I had a thread.
How you ended up in Vietnam was the topic. So you came there. Why did you go to Vietnam for?
I was just on a gap year traveling and I liked it. I went back to England to study at Manchester University. I hated it. So I came back to Vietnam, became a teacher initially, and just, got settled into a way of life. But again, when I was establishing myself and getting a career going and all these kinds of things, I was basically a lefty. Once I became red pilled, I had a crisis. I was like, oh my God, like the demographic replacement is happening. I'm not going to produce white babies. What am I doing? Do I have to get a divorce? Do I have to do this? Millennial West, I spoke to him. He was just like, get a divorce. He's like, do it. All right, make the sacrifices for your race. And I thought, I'm a Catholic. I can't do it. I can't get a divorce. I'll just, I'll make politically incorrect videos instead. That'll be my contribution. So that's what I did. But yeah, back to Vietnam and just how epic these people are. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Yeah, so they managed to keep the Confucianism, the roots of their culture intact, even through communist revolution. And that only lasted, the real full communism went on for about 6 years. If you're being generous, you could say 12. But then they had economic reforms, and today it's not a communist country anymore. It's like a libertarian socialist, a libertarian social order almost. I mean, it's more like you've got a monarchy. You've got a single state. It's a single state, government, right? Like there's no democracy, very low taxation, very low regulation, quite limited government interference, and just the feeling of being free here. I mean, yeah, they will bother you if you. It's the reason why I say it's like a monarchy. If you disrespect the king, someone might chop your head off, right? That would happen in under a monarchy. But other than that, the king doesn't tax too much. He has to pay for his own wars. He's got to keep you on board for his reign, however long he lives. He hopes he'll give it over to his son. They are planning to be in power here forever. So they're quite benevolent. It really is a benevolent dictatorship. And they are not on board with Globo Homo at all, as far as I can see. They're trying to resist it in certain ways. I don't know how successful that battle will be. And that is an interesting one, because Confucianism versus Globo Homo, they cannot. Go on.
Can I pick up the point there, which I thought was quite interesting? So the implication is that people that are involved in democracies know that they are only going to be in power for a short period of time. We could suggest they do it because they like the power, they like the attention, the money, and they think in terms of the next election and winning the next election rather than long term. And so, are you suggesting that when it's not a democracy, or not a real democracy, like a managed democracy, whatever you want to call it, then that can have a positive side to it, because they want to stay in power forever, and they have to think in the long term, and there's a positive dimension to dictatorship.
Yeah, of course. Yes. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's entirely positive. I mean, maybe you could pick out some positives of democracy. I'm entirely black-pilled on whether or not democracy can work. I think it's awful. I think it divides your ethnic group. It turns them against each other. It gives them a false identity. It somehow implies as well, after the election, that the government is now legitimate, and that they're this. Well, they've been voted in. It's the will of the people. What have the Conservatives done in the last year that was voted for? Absolutely nothing. But the Vietnamese government, if the only way they're going to be voted out is people chopping off their heads in some town square. That's how a party that can't be voted out ends, if they're not taking care of people. So slowly they did the economic reforms. They realized communism wasn't working, and they're pretty much, I feel like, I mean, obviously there's corruption. There are, it's not a perfect government. It's not like everybody in there is an expert. Most of them have an engineering background, which is interesting. The same in China. They're all engineers for some reason. That's like prerequisite for getting involved in politics. You've got to be an engineer.
In our politics, they all have humanities degrees and social science degrees. And
right.
It's considered quite unusual that Mrs. Thatcher had a science degree. It was a rare thing that Mrs. Thatcher had. Nobody else has ever had a science degree who was in charge of the government, and she had a science degree. Whereas in these developing countries, they realise that the important thing is science. Everything else is just decadent. If you go to I was briefly corresponding with people at university. I'm in seriously third world countries like South Sudan, the University of Juba. They don't sod about with departments of literature or whatever there. It's agricultural science, chemistry. Yeah. That's the stuff, engineering stuff that's actually useful. So that's a good point. Yeah. Are there any things that you sort of would be more concerned about saying in Vietnam that you could say in the West? That in Vietnam they're quite sexually puritanical, I suppose.
Well, that's there. I mean, like, the ideal for a person here, just before I get to your question, would be get married young, have about 3 to 4 kids, and make enough money to be able to do that. Buy a big house and put your parents in there, and your grandparents hopefully as well, and maybe even an uncle or an aunt or two or whatever, and take care of your family. That's the focus. So like, if you're going to come into this country and criticize like that goal and say, you're an idiot, why don't you just I don't know, shag a load of women and be a degenerate or something, like, they're not going to like it. They're not going to like you criticizing their culture. That's going to upset them a lot. They're very defensive of that. They've had enough of foreigners coming in and trying to tell them what to do. So they're very proud. You could never insult Ho Chi Minh. You could never say something bad about him. But I don't feel like this is infringement upon me. I mean, especially as a guest. If I were Vietnamese, maybe I'd feel a little bit differently about that. But overall, they have a great situation. I mean, this is a booming economy. They've got plenty enough liberty. Like, nobody's stopping them doing anything they really want to do with their lives. The culture is more what infringes upon them, because Confucianism dictates your role in relation to your relationships with other people. It's all relative, right? So if somebody is around who's older than you must behave like this. If you're with your wife, you behave like this. If you're with your father or your grandfather, you've got to adopt the particular role, and your pronoun will change depending on who you're talking to. So if I'm speaking to someone younger, they'll call me An or Chu. And if I speak to someone older who's a man, I'll call him An or Chu, depending on his age. And that will dictate how I've got to.
We have that sort of thing. We used to have that sort of thing, that you would address a person who was older as Mr. So-and-so. We used to have it as Mr.
Sure.
So-and-so or so-and-so. A person that was younger, you wouldn't. In Finland, they have this pronoun difference. So sinä is you, is informal you, and te is formal you. And then there'll be a point in a conversation where they'll say in Finnish, shall we, drop the te, basically. Yes, let's drop the te. And that's the equivalent of, we're now on first name terms or something like that. In Finland, everyone's on first name terms. So we used to have this code, really. You see it very clearly in sort of 40 Towers. There was a code of how you addressed someone that was older, younger, of a higher station, lower station.
It's natural
now. Everyone's on.
It works because it's natural. It doesn't have to be imposed by the state. There's no like propaganda telling you, I don't know, like it's not like say like a body positivity movement telling you to find obese women attractive. Like it just seems to emerge naturally all across the world that you respect elders. But it's much stronger here, because if your grandfather said to you, you will be a lawyer, you will be a lawyer. There's no debate. If you take home a girl and your parents don't like her and you say, I want to marry this girl, they say, no, she's not good enough. Nowadays, maybe you'd be able to have a debate, but basically that's not allowed. There's duty, it's quite rigid.
There was a study by a guy called Apostolou, his name was. He's a Greek, and he argued that we are basically evolved to arranged marriage. Like, for most of the history of the West, people have been in arranged marriages, not necessarily forced marriages, but arranged marriages, where the person that finds you your partner is your parents, to a lesser extent your friends. And this was the case very conspicuously up until at least the mid 1700s. That the idea that you couldn't just meet somebody in a bar, that wasn't possible. Women were chaperoned. The woman would never be alone ever, and so up until the Victorian era. And so there was a degree to which everything was arranged, and we are evolved to arranged marriages. And it implies that we're not evolved. This idea that you just find the person you like and you fall in love and that's the person for you. No. We're not evolved for that, and if we try and do it, we'll make bad decisions. We're evolved, our parents and our other relatives and to a lesser extent our friends, to find us mates, to set us up on dates with those mates, with someone in the distance, making sure there's no hanky panky. That's what we're evolved to, and if we don't do that, then we'll balls it up and we'll choose inappropriate people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I could have probably benefited from an arranged marriage. Don't tell the wife, But yeah, it's true. I think most of us could. Things would be a lot simpler and would make sense. But it's interesting what's happening right now in Vietnam is that the globo homo is coming in, and because people have this mindset of obey, critical thinking is not really promoted here. In fact, if you translate critical thinking, I'm not talking about critical theory, just to be very clear here, just critical thinking, empiricism, you know, the type of skills you'd learn as a scientist, how to evaluate evidence, how to question things properly. They're not promoted here. It actually translates as just criticism. And the whole point of Confucianism is to promote harmony. So you do what you're told and you fulfill your duty and you fulfill your role. And as all of this foreign influence is coming in via TikTok and Facebook and YouTube, which is freely available in the country, they don't really seem to censor it at all. And all these kids now can speak English, and loads of them go to international schools, the British International School and the American International, you know, they're all here. And all of their banners say things like democracy, integrity, and leadership, and inclusivity, and all this shit when you walk into these schools, right? Yeah. Exactly. So all these being completely brainwashed, and they don't really have any psychological defenses to it. So right now they've retranslated, just recently, they've retranslated critical theory into a dialogue for harmony or something, and they're borrowing it and repurposing it, not to criticize their own culture, because obviously critical thinking, you can use it to subvert a culture, right? You can use it to say, like, you get a teacher in front of a classroom full of 12-year-olds. We go, hey, I'm adopting the dialogical approach today, kids, okay? And I'm going to ask you 45 questions about like why your culture's shit, and you've got to defend all your traditions to me, and do it now, 10-year-old, and you're going to win that argument, and you're going to make them feel like I've got to abandon this. I've got to embrace transgenderism or something else. So instead, what they're doing is they're using these skills to defend, specifically to criticize what comes from the West, and what, well, the West, you know, from MTV, from the BBC, to give Vietnamese people these tools so that they can defend their own culture, so they can defend their own traditions, which is a very interesting kind of approach, or a way of doing it, because they know that their people do need critical thinking skills for the current jobs market. Like, there are international firms coming in, which aren't here. They're not politically correct at all. If you get a job at HSBC, there's no talk of inclusion or diversity, any of that shit. If you're working here, you know, but they need those skills for these jobs, which is obviously important in a booming economy. It's like 7% GDP growth. They've got to keep up. But they also, it comes, you know, through all this media. I'm rambling here, but I'll give you one anecdote. There's an 11-year-old girl. I talked about this on my Telegram. I got her age wrong. I think I said she was 13. She's not. I found out her age. She's 11. She goes to an international school. She lives in my apartment block. I see her at the shop sometimes. She's charming, you know. She knows everybody. Everybody's really friendly in the community here. Like, there's no fear. Children are always playing around. Everybody knows everyone. Anyway, so she chats to me all the time because she can speak English. And she's one day she tells me about Ahmaud Arbery and Black Lives Matter. And she knew all the names. She knew George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, fucking Mike Brown. She's going, like, listing them off. The police are so racist in America. And I said, how do you know this? Oh, well, they talked about it at school. And I said, okay, what did they say? And they said, oh, we have to research it for our homework. I said, well, where'd you research? She went on TikTok. She's like addicted to TikTok. There are all these influencers who are 17, 18 years old. And they're just feeding them this narrative, and there's no resistance. You know, I mean, what can I do in a 5-minute chat? I said, well, maybe you should think about this. You know, but
it occurs to me, Hugh, that one of it reminds me actually in a albeit in your case in a more extreme way, of Finland. So I wrote this book a few years ago called The Silent Rape Epidemic. And one of the things I was fascinated by was how quickly Finland turned from being a nationalistic, racist country when I came here 15 years ago, in which it was okay to have, you know, gollywogs on sweet packets. And they had these sweets that... Naked pussy translates as nigger kisses. That they had these, you know, everything was fine. And so quickly, about sort of 10 years ago, really, or a bit less, it flipped really quickly. And I think that's what happens when you have a people that are highly conformist. So in a country where you've got a class of people who are these critical, who are actually critical, who are, because they combine high IQ, outlier high IQ, with sort of moderately psychopathic personality. And those kinds of people, and there's a lot of them at the PA conference, in my view, are critical of whatever's happening. And so they slow down any kind of change. And in East Asian culture, I did a research with this Japanese fellow, Kenya Kura. They don't have much genius, because what genius is outlier high IQ. They don't have outlier high IQ. They have a small gene pool. So there's not many outliers. They are cleverer than us, the Japanese, but there's not many outliers. Plus moderately psychopathic personality. Well, there's not many moderately psychopathic personality, so there's not many geniuses. So they're very clever. They'll make your car more efficient or whatever, but they won't invent the car, because that involves upsetting people and change and all this, and they don't like that. It involves curiosity. And what we found was the Finns were intermittent between East Asians and Europeans in terms of the prevalence of these gene forms that are associated with curiosity and being critical and being a bit psychopathic, basically. And so what you would expect is that they would conform totally to nationalism, but once it flipped, once the 25% of the population became mutants or whatever, and it flipped, then it would go very quickly, because nobody would fail to conform. Nobody would question it. Nobody would be there. And I think that's what would happen they talk about how in Japan, these fads just go through the population with incredible speed. Everyone just conforms. And I've noticed that in Finland, there was this thing called widget spinners, these stupid things you put on your finger and spin round, and it went through the population of Finnish children with incredible. And I think that's perhaps what you would expect in Vietnam, but more extreme. The South Asians are more.
I wonder, how are they going to defend against the Great Reset or whatever's coming in? And
it'll be like Finland.
The next generation of Vietnamese youth. I mean, especially because in the international schools, obviously the kids are from rich families, so their parents are going to be disproportionately high IQ. That's how they've made their money. They're going to be the next generation of entrepreneurs, of business leaders, and they're all going to be blue-pilled, self-loathing cucks. And what are they going to do? Are these kids going to be out on the street tearing down statues? It's not that hard to imagine if they're being raised just as school children in England have been raised. I mean, the statue tearing down epidemic started in Bristol. It wasn't, the more diverse places copied and followed on, and we're all too happy to do so, and perhaps for slightly different motives, more maybe ethnically driven, driven more by ethnic hatred. But I wonder what's the future for this country, how they can hold it at bay. They have a government that can be authoritarian when it wants to be.
I suppose
there's some hope.
I suppose that the one thing that can potentially holds it at bay, I can't talk about Southeast Asians, although the relationship between Southeast Asians and Northeast Asians is very close. But with Northeast Asians, is they are seemingly inherently highly ethnocentric. So the strategy they followed is not the genius strategy that we followed, where you're relatively low in ethnocentrism, but you have these geniuses, and this allows you to expand and become throw out more geniuses and trade and learn from others and throw out more geniuses and whatever, and then dominate other people through better inventions. The strategy they've adopted is not doing that, and is being very, very ethnocentric, and so that would make them resistant to it. And I think the ethnocentrism is in the West is upheld. We're not particularly ethnocentric, and so the ethnocentrism is upheld by the religion. You're the best, the religion says so. And once you lose the religion, which tells you you're God's people, which the Finns used to think they were God's people, the Finns used to think that the references in the Bible that talk about the people of the North being of God, and the devil being in the South, which it says in the Bible that the devil is in the South. The devil is in the North but down. That's what it was. Devil is in the North but down. Is a reference to them, and that's all gone. So yeah, I suppose with the Vietnamese it would be
some positive note here, because I don't want to give the impression that every kid is being indoctrinated in an international school. Obviously, that is a very small minority of children. The vast majority are going to government schools where they are taught they are the greatest country on earth. The reason why they're great is because they make sacrifices for their country. And I was going to say something about the war as well, how America couldn't win. I was going to say a quote before I got sidelined. That's what I forgot earlier, which was if you want to drink tea with us tomorrow, we'll have a cup of tea. But if you want to fight, we'll fight to the very last man. It's something like that. It's more eloquent than that. That's what Ho Chi Minh wrote in a letter to the American generals. Basically, you're just going to be here forever because you've got to kill all of us to win. And that is very much still the mindset here. They will not give in, you know. And I've seen every now and then a foreigner do something, especially when I used to hang out in more touristy areas, a foreigner do something insulting, and just 5 Vietnamese guys are just like, right, we're going to beat you up. And that's the way they are. You know, they're quite stern that this is their land, this is their country. They make no excuses for it. That is the predominant mindset. I don't know how they would feel or how they could be manipulated. They have a central bank. They've borrowed money from international institutions. Will the Great Reset come in here and will it do what it intends to do to the rest of the world? I don't know. Time will tell. But I'm far more hopeful about Vietnam existing as an ethno-state and you know, going on than I am for what am I breaking up here, Dustin? You're going like this.
Oh, a little bit. Never mind.
Okay. Anyway, I'm far more hopeful about this country though. I'm pretty black-pilled about the West at the moment. Don't know. How do you feel about the West?
We're about halfway through, so I would say to those who are watching, hello. If you are new to the Jolly Heretic, please subscribe. YouTube are crushing my, they don't let me, they removed 100 subscribers a week ago for no apparent reason. So please do subscribe, and if you think you've subscribed, please check you've subscribed and smash that like button on the video and smash that bell button. It really helps if you do that, but particularly do subscribe. I want to get up to 50,000. I'm not in the level of Hugh with his 64,000 subscribers or whatever it is he has. I'm not of his caliber, but it would be good if I could get up. Yes,
you came in the game a little bit late. I came in the boom.
I came in the game after they started crushing free speech. So I'm a conservative, you see. I'm a conservative. I'm not the kind of person that would pack up and move out to Vietnam. So I was a bit late. So please do subscribe. If you want to send a super chat, then I'd be very grateful if you do that. You can do so through Entropy. You can see the link on the screen, or you can do so through YouTube. If you want to send a super chat, I will prioritize questions that are for Hugh. Though I do have some very interesting questions from Monday, and I'm going to go through those. If I don't do your question today, I will, of course, do it on Monday. And the benefit of the delay might be frustrating, but the benefit is I can research it. So one of the questions I'm going to look at today, bloody brilliant. I mean, really amazingly fascinating question on the length of the taint. I have researched it and I've learned something new, and your questions are. I'm jolly grateful for them. We live stream here on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. UK time. We are an online public house, so please get yourself a beer, or if you're a girl, a gin and tonic or a baby shab or whatever bitch piss it is you drink. I can be insulting to girls because they make up about 9% of my audience. So we have some wonderful girls on here. Carlotta, who is from Spain. Celia, who is Artemis, who is from Sweden. And that's about it. And a couple in Bournemouth. And a black girl near Waterloo Station. But otherwise, it seems to be mainly men. So if you have a question for Hugh, then do send that in. I'll look at the questions first. Thank you, Simondo, for your £1. I'm most grateful for that. Thank you very much. Every little counts and all that. I shall put that towards my parents sent me for my birthday a series of chocolates, including Fry's Turkish Delight. They used to cost about that much money when I used to walk home from school as a kid and get some sweets to walk over from school with. But before I wanted to ask Hugh about, so we've discovered how he ended up in Vietnam, and I wanted to ask him about how he ended up about a few other things. We're going to talk about the election. But before we move on to that, we have a question for Hugh, which is from Doosty, and he says, "Hey Hugh, I discovered you through your Vox Haiti response video. Good work. Could you talk a bit more about why you felt compelled to make that video?" Sound, Hugh.
Hello. Sorry. That video repulsed me from Vox. They were making the premise of the video is comparing Haiti and the Dominican Republic. 2 countries on one island, split by a border. And it's a series that Vox does called Borders. It's very high production budget, and he goes, why does this border make one country relatively well off and the other languish in poverty? What's with the border? And of course, if you know anything about the history of these countries, Dominican Republic has far more European genetic ancestry. Basically, they're like, I don't know, 40% Spanish or something like that, whereas Haiti is basically pretty much pure African. I mean, they even killed all the mulattoes. I call them mulattoes because that at the time, that's who they killed. That was the social class during the Haitian Revolution that were killed. They obviously killed the whites, and then they killed the mulattoes. So yeah, that video repulsed me. They were saying they tried to argue that the Dominican Republic was somehow oppressing Haiti and blaming Haitian problems on the Dominican Republic. You know, Haitians have tried to invade the DR like 4 or 5 times. They're always running over their border and raping their women. They're awful neighbors. And even when there are earthquakes, when they need financial aid, when they need medical aid, they allow Haitian mothers to come over to their hospitals to give birth, which their taxpayers pay for, and then they send them back. And they do send them back. Maybe that's oppressive. I don't know. But they're like, come over, we'll give you free healthcare if you're in the country, you know. They're nice. And I don't know, it just infuriated me that even a country like the DR is being attacked by this bullshit. They're even saying because you're relatively better off, and they're still not even that. If you go to the Dominican Republic, it's not like a metropolis. It's not beautiful, like wonderful buildings everywhere. There's a lot of poverty. They've got problems. They have a lot of corruption. There's a lot of crime there. It's not all hunky dory. And even because it's that egalitarian mindset. Oh, well, these people are slightly better off than these people, so these people are to blame. Let's shame them. Let's run their name. Let's drag it under the bus. Run them through the mud. It just really repulses me the way progressives will do that. And when they do it, they think that they're morally superior. They think that they have the moral high ground. And it's like, actually, the people over there are just marginally more successful because they're not fuck-ups like Haitians are. Haitians, the stuff they do is so moronic. They cut down all the trees off the hillsides. So when rain comes, it runs off and floods all their farms, which causes basically famine conditions every single year. These storms are predictable. You know, they're on a climate cycle and they do this every year. Oh no, we're flooded again. We need more aid. Like, why don't you just stop cutting down your trees? No, they don't do that, you know? And that's who's to blame for that? Racists over in the Dominican Republic? It really irritates me. And of course, like part of the video was trying to prep Americans for like, look how poor these Haitians are. The Dominican Republics these Dominicans are even oppressing them. You got to take them in. You got to take more of these people in. Oh, yeah. The last people you want in your country are Haitians. No offense to Haitians, you know what I mean? But they're statistically speaking, they're bad news.
Okay, I'll just deal with it because I thought it was interesting, and it's not a question for Hugh, but I as I say, the questions that you sent in on Monday, I will get through as many of them as I can today, but and those that I don't, I will do when I'm on my Jack Jones next Monday. But a question from Necromancer was very interesting. £5. Why is the female anus so close to the vagina? Also, what is the right course of action after the girlfriend studies the coprophilia folder? Thanks. Okay, so the reason why the anus
coprophilia folder,
you know, the joy of back sex. This is called the anal.
You're talking about anal.
Yes. So this is called the anogenital distance. And the anogenital distance is twice as long among males, although there is more variance, always because of the male variability hypothesis, than it is among females. Males with a short, this distance, it's known officially as the anogenital distance. Other words for it, of course, are the bas, the taint, the Humber Bridge, which is a reference to the bridge between Grimsby and Hull, i.e. between the fishy bit and the shitty bit. There's a few other words for it. The Crontus, the brink, i.e., between the brown and the pink in snooker, and whatever. But and it's measured from the distance between the centre of the anus and the rugated skin on the scrotum, or between the anus and the vestibule on the vajayjay. Now, males with a shorter distance are more feminized. Males with a longer distance are more masculinized. Males with a shorter, longer distance are less likely to have fertility problems, less likely to need fertility treatment, and produce more semen. Males, on average, it is. There was a study which found that males that have a small taint are 7 times more likely to have problems with under 2 inches, 7 times more likely to have a problem with fertility. Women who have fertility problems, such as polycystic ovary syndrome, things like that, tend to have long taints. So it's not a matter of why do they have it, it's that the taint is an expression, taint length is an expression of masculinization. So the longer your taint, the more masculinized you are, the more testosterone you have in the system. The shorter your taint, the more estrogen you have in the system, the more feminized you are. Now, I would hope that we're not going to have people posting proof of the length of their taint on Twitter, but I would assume that the kind of men that are involved in Antifa have taints of about 1 inch. And the kind of women that are involved in Antifa have taints that are a mile wide. But that is the evolutionary psychology of the taint. So get that ruler out, chaps and chapesses, and there you are. So that's the taint issue dealt with for now. I'm sorry, Hugh. What were we talking about before we got to the issue of the bar?
I'd answered the question. It was about Haiti. Your chat was hilarious just then. Some guy just goes, "I've got a huge taint, bro." I think all followers of the Jolly Heretic,
the followers of the Jolly Heretic, if they are men, have taints the length of the fourth bridge, and the women have taints that are so small they barely exist. That I am certain. What it raises is the issue of, and it's a bloody annoying thing because I only discovered this today. It was a fascinating question, and thank you very much, sir. Is that it means that there's probably going to be race differences in taint length. Of course there are, and the East Asians are going to have the smallest taints, and the blacks or the Bushmen or whatever are going to have the longest taints. Of course, I doubt it's been measured. But
let me ask you a quick question, Dustin, because I always just think, what a red herring, shut up, that's dumb, when I hear this. But people say it all the time. They go, when you're talking about race realism with people, they go, didn't you know, excuse me, didn't you know that in Africa, there's more genetic diversity than any other continent on Earth? And I go, whoa, like, yes, I did know. And I don't get it. What is the point they're trying to make to debunk us there? And what is a good response? Because I just go, well, who cares? I don't understand.
They're just trying to sound clever. The reason why, one of the things you notice if you move to Finland is the genetic diversity is limited, right? So among the Finns, they all kind of are quite similar genetically. That's why there's all this inbreeding now, lots of dwarfs. It's noticeable. I always see dwarfs when I walk around here. And you see there's not much wildlife, not much variety of flowers, not much anything. Because if it's a harsh environment, then there's strong levels of Darwinian selection. So only a small number of things that are very strongly adapted to the ecology can survive. If it's an easy environment, albeit one which is unstable, but it's an easy environment, and there's not much selection pressure. So, boom, you get huge levels of genetic diversity because all kinds of things can survive because you don't really have to adapt to the environment because it's so easy. Anybody can bloody survive. You have to adapt to it being unstable. So you could be wiped out at any second, but there's huge diversity. So Africa has huge diversity in terms of the animals, in terms of the plants, and in terms of the people. And so the genetic difference forget black people, within Bushmen, which is the original population of Southern Africa before they were driven further south by the blacks, separate race, is the difference between the San and some other Bushman tribe is as big as the difference between like Europeans and Arabs.
Right. And what does that matter in terms of us saying that race is real and a biological reality?
Counter argument to them should be, yes, there is, and that's what you would predict based on Darwinian models.
Yeah, I never understand. They seem to think it's a counter, but I never get where they're coming from. I've heard this quite a few times. People, didn't you know? Excuse me. And I go, I don't understand how this. What is the point here? You know, it's kind of like saying, well, therefore, open the borders. I don't understand what connection they're trying to make.
I think it's just a way of trying to disarm you, a way of trying to sound intelligent, a way of trying to sound like I know more than you. Didn't you know this deep, fascinating thing? You didn't. Oh, maybe there's other things you don't know. Hugh, by the way, is eating copete, which is an Italian.
I think, yeah.
Which is
Italian cured, homemade cured pork. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, gorgeous pork loin.
It's very
I'm quite proud of it. First time I've managed to pull it off. I've tried a few times, and it's pretty bloody good this time. I will cut the fennel a little bit the next time I make it, but it's great. If you look it up, chaps, online, copiete, most cured meat takes like weeks. If you're just doing a little duck breast or something, it's weeks in the fridge. This is 3 days. So if you want cured meats and you don't want to wait 3 weeks, and you also don't want to go to some deli shop and spend a lot of money, you just make it at home, and it's pretty easy to make. Bit of red wine, spices, salt.
It's worth doing. Now, I had another question I want to deal with today because the person. Oh, come off it! Don't crash on me now. What's happening here? Can you see me, Hugh?
I can hear you.
There's some problem with the computer. I'm trying to get something to work, and it's not working, and it's going to balls over. Oh, here we go. Yes, because someone sent in a very generous donation of £100, and I'd like to deal with that now. And they said, cheers from the non-leftist cheers from the non-leftist part of California. Do you have any thoughts on people without an internal dialogue voice in their head? Also, if abortion was banned, would the overwhelming majority of unaborted be mostly spiteful mutants and people life history strategy? Right. I'll answer to Hugh his comments in a minute. But with regard to, there is research on this idea of the internal dialogue, and most people have an internal dialogue in their head where, they say things to themselves. As people get old, when they're children, people don't actually have that internal dialogue yet in many cases, and they see the world in terms of pictures or feelings or whatever, and not in terms of talking to themselves. So I guess they're a bit like an animal, like a cat or something. It's like they must experience the world almost as music. Was it Arthur Schopenhauer said that music was the closest manifestation of the will? And that must be kind of how they experience things. There's no words talking to themselves about how they feel. And so that would imply that those people are less likely to think about the future. They'll be more impulsive. They're less likely to think and overthink. Less likely to have depression, which, of course, tends to come along with age within certain boundaries. And so there's a minority of people that don't have this internal dialogue, yes. And they see the world, and even as adults, they report in terms of pictures or words, but there's no voice in their head. And what that would imply is that those people are either stupid, like they're childlike, or if they're not childlike, then something hasn't developed properly in sort of frontal lobe, which means they're a bit peculiar. And I looked into the research on this, and that's what seems to be the case. As for unaborted people,
can I ask a quick question on that? Just an extension. What about people who find it difficult to control their internal monologue or dialogue, I suppose, because it goes back and forth? But what about people who allow it to? It sort of almost takes over.
Yes, those people tend to be very high, and often the internal monologue will be critical. You get some people where the internal monologue is telling them they're bad, and some people where the internal monologue isn't even internal and they believe it's external. And those people are schizophrenics or psychotics. And as for the people where they believe it's internal, but it's telling them that they're shit, then those people have depression and things like that.
Are they intelligent or dumb?
it tends to be intelligence. So depression correlates with intelligence. And I suspect the reason for that is that if you are intelligent, then you think more. And if you think more about bad things.
Yeah.
I
have to consciously check my internal, voice. It will get negative if I don't actively try and make it say more positive things and sort of look this is good. This is good. Don't get carried away here. I'll have
You're lying in bed at night. You're like, Hugh, old chap, I think that's a bit mean to yourself. I mean, I think
positive reinforcement from whoever is there. Yeah, I have to do it.
Not
all the time, but every now and then, especially if you're hungover or just having a really stressful day, it can get a bit much, and I have to talk to myself and say, you've got to calm down, and you can get through this.
So, Hugh, old chap, you really are a twat, aren't you? And you're like, well, steady on. That's a bit much. I know you're hungover.
Don't be rude.
That's a bit much. I know you to be rude. So that what you say about abortion, I've actually done a video on this. I think it's only on BitChute about abortion in Ireland. What we know is that that there is studies on the personality of the kind of women that pursue abortion. And those women are high in psychopathology and high in narcissism. So on average, they're not very nice people. They're low in conscientiousness, they're low in agreeableness, they're low in altruism. And some would argue that you'd have to be to kill your own child. And so that is the kind of person that has an abortion. And so therefore, if you ban abortion in a country where contraception is unreliable or whatever, and people can get pregnant, i.e. the Republic of Ireland is a good example. So if you basically, contraception is unacceptable because they're Catholic and it's not easy to get hold of contraception during the period when the Pope said contraception wasn't allowed, and abortion is banned, then what I would expect would be for all these pleasant psychopathic women to have children. And these traits would be passed on to their children, and you would get a generation of people with a relatively high level of psychopathology relative to somewhere like England, where abortion was legal. And I think that's manifesting now in Ireland, because you've got these just psychopathic, anti-religious, anti-Catholic, mutant nutters that are directing policy in the Republic of Ireland, and very quickly it's flipped with such speed from being a very conservative society, which it was even when I was a child. When I was a child in the mid-80s, they had the referendum to make abortion being illegal part of the constitution, which meant that to change it, you had to have another referendum. That's how conservative they were in the 80s. They were mega conservative. They were like England in the 50s, which is interestingly what happens, which is when the conservative society is on the point of breaking down, which was the case in England in the 50s, then it sort of reasserts itself strongly and becomes more conservative, which is what happened in England in the 50s. It was more conservative towards gays or whatever than in the 40s. So I think that's what happened in Ireland. So yes, sir, that is what I would.
Isn't that a correlation backwards there, though? Because we are England, the UK is more degenerate, more progressive, has been more, I don't know, open or inclusive when it comes to immigration. Basically, just more globo-homoified, and we've had abortion for longer.
Yes,
they've had it for less time. Now you're saying, well, that's responsible for their decline. Our decline came sooner. We've had abortion. Isn't England the abortion capital of Europe? I think it is. Something like 250,000 a year.
Right. So we have abortion. So therefore, women who are psychos that don't want to have children don't have them.
But you're saying, well, look at what's happening in Ireland, right? All these nutters. But I mean, England, we've destroyed religion far sooner than those people have.
Yeah, I know, but what fascinates me, but that's true. But they were poorer than us. So being poorer than us means that they are going to have probably be under greater stress, greater mortality salience, and be more likely to be religious. They've been under harsher Darwinian selection than us until more recently, because they were poorer than us.
Wouldn't abortion? Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No. I'm just wondering if the incredible speed. I mean, when I went to Ireland for the first time in 2002, it was a conservative society. Within about 8 years, completely changed. And I just wonder if the tipping point being reached, it could have been relevant, was that the issue of
due to abortion. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know. Abortion to me seems to just raise time preference in society. It's another form of contraception. It like adds to all the other socio-cultural and economic pressures or factors that make people engage in more degenerate lifestyles. It's like, you know, happy-go-lucky, just fuck around. You can just, you know, get rid of the little squirt. And let's not forget, I think most people haven't really considered abortion at any great length because it is so accepted in the UK. It's not even a debate. It's not even a proper debate. Like in America, they're still having the real pro-life versus pro-choice real battle wages on. In England, it seems like it's largely set, at least in mainstream politics. And people are just like, it doesn't matter. It's just, just do it, you know. I think that you might not necessarily be that psychotic to do it under the circumstances in England, especially if you're not some kind of philosopher genius who doesn't consider these things at length.
I'm not sure because in politics, it's not an issue. But I mean, lots of women would perfectly happily, openly say, right, I use condoms, I've been on the pill, I've had the coil. Women would be more skeptical about admitting they'd had an abortion. I think it still remains a bit unacceptable, doesn't it?
Okay, maybe there is somewhat of a taboo around it, but
there is a taboo.
I don't know. Yeah. I think like almost everybody is pro-abortion in England. Almost everybody I know. Maybe you're a few years older than me, so you've got a different perspective there. Maybe there is a generational gap. I don't know. You're only about like 5 years older than me, though. Say again.
When were you born?
1986.
Okay, I'm 6 years older. I don't think it's anything to do with that. I can see the positive of the negative of it, which is the idea of life being sacred and therefore you shouldn't have abortion. But I can see the positive of it, which is that the kind of people that are going to want abortions are mainly going to be unpleasant people, and the heritability of those traits is high.
We reduce criminality with it. I've heard these arguments before. Yeah. I just always feel like I don't know. The more readily available abortion is, the more acceptable it is. The worse your society is. Those things seem to go together to me.
Yes. William Harris, 100 Norwegian kroner. Thank you very much, Tack. Says 2 of my favourite expats. Thank you. Didn't catch the whole thing, unfortunately. Where can I see this later? As I always do, will take this down, sir, and then I will upload it as quickly as I can to BitChute. So that is the plan there. So a New Vision 2010 says top arguments for the existence of significant genetic differences between populations is limits of possibility of organ transplants. Top arguments for the existence of significant genetic differences between populations is limits of possibility of organ transplants, and what more? Oh, well, I suppose I could have dealt with this another day. The answer is that you can look at the cluster analyses. So we've got the detailed genetic analyses of these populations, and they cluster the genes, the genetic variants, into approximately 12 different groups. So that's the main argument for the existence of race. That's exactly what happens. I mean, you can do the pragmatic argument that if you don't accept it, then black people and South Asian people in the UK will die because there won't be enough donor organs. But they clearly cluster into these, and it is quite clear, into these different groups. The only group that's not clear what race we should put them in is the Negritos, i.e. the people that live in these pygmy people that live in Indonesia and the Andaman Islands. And it's not clear what they are. Some people say that they're Southeast Asians. Some people say that they're sort of Aborigines and whatever. It's not clear. But otherwise, that's my answer to that question.
Dawson, I've got a question for you. I know you're trying to get through super chats, and I keep interrupting. Is the guest allowed to do this? I'm gonna use your intellect while I can. The MAOA 2R, that's the 2 repeater allele variant of the MAOA gene. The warrior gene. How significant is the research on this? 5% of blacks have it. 5% of black males have it. Something like 0.2% of white males, and then it's like 0.000000056% of Asians. But this particular gene is cited all over the place by race realists. What do you make of it? What, how significant is this difference?
It may be. You'd expect it's a candidate gene, so you don't get genes on their own. The genes tend to cluster with other genes as part of a chromosome, and those genes will be an adaptation to a particular environment. And so, if you have a gene which can be shown in individuals to be associated with violent behavior, let's say, and that gene more common in a particular population, then what you would expect is that population would, on average, would be more violent. That's what you would expect. And if that is the case, based on other measures of violence, then you can start to present a reasonable case for saying that that's potentially a causal factor. That if you are adapted to an ecology that is easy, which means you don't have to cooperate with people and whatever, and and it is unstable, which means that it benefits to being violent and aggressive, and then you would expect to have candidate genes which at the individual level will predict those behaviors. You'd expect them to be more prevalent in those ecologies, and so if they are, then you're saying it all sort of fits together. So I mean, it's a big area of research, but it's what you would predict. So I wouldn't be that skeptical of it. It makes a great deal of sense.
What it's supposed to do is release enzymes or something that break down neurotransmitters that make you aggressive, right? These neurotransmitters release, they make you aggressive, they up your heart rate, they get you ready for a fight, and then after the fight, you're supposed to then calm down, and that is when the MAOA gene is going to work to calm you down. Is that right? So if it's slacking on the job, if it's not working properly, you will remain in a more highly aggressive state. You might use a weapon during a fight, or you might be more prone to join a gang more generally. Are these things actually true?
All I can say, I haven't read a great deal into it. I've heard of it, but I haven't read a great deal. It makes sense, yeah. It would be a reasonable argument. We have a question from Cheeky Pop. Cheeky Pop was the person that asked me about this form of sex where you produce a great deal of semen. And I discovered that the animal that produces the most semen during sex for its body size is the boar. But anyway, look, Cheeky Pop says, Hugh, since you are eligible for Israeli citizenship, have you considered moving there after you get bored of Vietnam?
I'm not eligible. I think I can. Because I have a Jewish grandma on my dad's side, I can volunteer for what are they called? IDF, the forces. You can volunteer. Not them, the fighters, the people that go around killing Palestinians because they, came out of school with a rucksack. Get down, boom, boom. I can volunteer for them, but I can't get, you have to have a Jewish mum, I think, to get Israeli citizenship. You have to be like a proper Jew. I can't get it. If I could get it, I wouldn't take advantage of it. I have to say, the idea of living in Israel, I don't understand the appeal. I don't know, maybe Jews are super ethnocentric. Oh, well, they are. So that's why they want to live there and be with their people as they commit mass ethnic cleansing on these Palestinians. But I don't understand it. It seems like such a unstable lifestyle. The weather looks shit. Looks very dry and hot.
It's very expensive to live there. I'm told that food prices are like the same as Finland. So it's not cheap. It's not like going to Turkey or something on holiday.
Maybe I'd get a job there working for Tony Blair in Tel Aviv or something.
Listen, Hugh, Ron B has a question for you, which is Vietnam Wars involved intense Buddhist versus Catholic conflicts. Catholics left North Vietnam and ran South Vietnam government for a time. How much religious liberty is there now in Vietnam?
Basically, complete religious liberty now. Catholics are fine. Churches are everywhere. They're built. It's very nice, actually. You'll go somewhere and then there's a new church, all the time. So the Catholics are doing well. But it is true, during the revolution, a lot of priests were against it and were speaking out against communism. And there was also this general distrust, because you're getting your orders from a foreign country, from the Vatican, technically a foreign country. So they were like, are you really on board with us? And then, of course, they were telling their congregation, like, communism's evil. the hierarchy of the church is the only thing you should respect. Fuck this government. So a lot of priests were poisoned, disappeared, things like that did happen. But that hasn't happened since like the late 70s, I think. And now I don't see, Catholics are quite a strong force in the country. Police have to negotiate with them if they want to, like if they want to build a road somewhere and there are a lot of Catholics around, the government has to go in and deal with the Catholics and basically pay them off. Like it's not, they don't just steamroll over these people.
I see Jolly Heretic highlights in the chat. If Jolly Heretics would like to put up the part of the video I did doing an impression of Nassim Taleb or whatever his name is.
Who's Nassim Taleb?
Or Taleb Tassim, he's some person that hates IQ, which is on BitChute, then I wouldn't be averse to that. I do like the fact that Jolly Heretic, that this chat puts up things which I wouldn't keep on YouTube. Good show, says George, for 10 quid. Thank you very much, sir. That's most appreciated. And do subscribe to Hugh's channel as well if you're not a subscriber to Hugh's channel. Although, Hugh, are you going to put up a video again soon? Because you haven't put
I will. I will. I got a bit demotivated. I'm just not enthused by putting out content on YouTube lately. But I'll be back. I still like writing. I'm always writing videos and scripts and speeches and things like that. I'm always researching something. So I'm not. I don't feel. Excuse me. I don't feel like I'm out of the loop personally. I know people are like, you haven't posted a video for 11 months. But whatever, like it's not like I'm making money out of this thing. Like, just be patient. I'll post another video, and it'll be good. It'll be the next video I'm planning will probably be about 2 hours long.
Oh crikey! Well, we look forward to that. And one of your fans, Red Pills Go By, thank you, sir. Says big fan of Hugh. Keep the faith. I know you have to put up with crap. If we have to live in Biden's world, it'll wake more up. BitChute is nearly funded. So 99 Red Pills Go By would be very enthusiastic for you to put up a video. I'll answer this now because it relates to what we've talked about. Hello 1916 says, can I expect your paper to be on differences in taint length and with races and pressures that cause them, Dutton? I'd like to do it, but I'd have to find data. I mean, that's always the question, isn't it? Give me data. There's no point doing a theoretical paper saying we would expect different races to have. We don't even have good data, reliable data on race differences in penis length. There's some studies from the 30s that have found that there's race differences in the nature of the hymen. I mean, you'd think there'd be race differences in everything, really, or pretty much everything, because they are adaptations to different ecologies. His channel, Happy and Happer, is called On the Offensive. And Happy and Happer is presumably a Happer, which is the new ethnic group which is developing in America, which is that you have like a white father and a Northeast Asian mother. That's the Happers. Yeah, that's what they're doing. It's ethnogenesis happening in Hawaii and such like places, the Happers. Okay. So I will. I mean, if I can find data on it, sir, if I can find data where people have measured lots of people's anogenital distance, then I would be perfectly happy to do a paper on it, and that would be that. But until I can find it, I've got a paper forthcoming on race differences in testicle size. We have data on that. Interestingly, data that was from Vietnam, that was done on soldiers in the Vietnam War, large sample, multiracial, and there's race differences in testicle size. Ed, are your children Happers? Says Rohan Kale. Not really, no, because my wife is Finnish, which makes her on average about 5 to 10% Northeast Asian. So I don't think that my children qualify as Happers. So I'd say no to that. Not really, no. They're Finuits. Okay. Bertha's fourth says, thanks for the interesting conversation. That's most kind. I'm trying to find another Hugh question if we haven't done one yet. My wife is currently drinking Wales's finest brains dark ale and was down the pub while you were still wearing printed Iron Maiden t-shirts. Huzzah, says Perkin. Well, yes, if you saw my birthday edition, then there was, I was on holiday in Lyme Regis, I think it must have been, in about 1988, and they had a shop which would print T-shirts for you. And one of them was, I was into Iron Maiden. I got really into Iron Maiden. I was about 7, and I remember watching Wide Awake. It's probably a bit before Hugh's time. The Wide Awake show on Saturday mornings at 7:00, and they had these chaps on there doing us heavy metal, and they were 14 years old, which seemed terribly old at the time. And they had this song called "Cry Freedom." I still remember it. And then when my dad got up, I said to him, "What's heavy metal?" And he was very enthusiastic about this, and he put on "I Was Standing by the Nile" by Pink Floyd, which was the heavy metal song they ever did. But from that, Can I Play with Madness was in the charts at the time, you see. Eddie, can we see the pewter mug? Yes, here you are. And it's got a darts ball on it, which, as you know, I'm a fan of Michael van Gerwen. And so then I got into heavy metal, and I couldn't find, I was 7 years old, I couldn't find an Iron Maiden lunchbox. So I got this lunchbox and stuck a Iron Maiden sellotapes, an Iron Maiden thing that I cut out from Kerrang to it. I mean, think what it must have been like then, chaps and chapesses. No internet, no things you can just find images and print them out. Timmy Mallet, says Nathan Prime. Yes, that was. Do you remember Timmy Mallet? Hugh?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vaguely.
And they had to go
like the Chuckle Brothers or something. You know, it's sort of there from childhood.
Okay. This is from Lee Garfield. This is reference to you, Hugh, and he says, "Last time I heard an accent like that, I got 5 years." Oh, so you're saying that Hugh sounds like a judge? Oh, well, I suppose he does, yes. Posh actor.
You sounds like a what? You broke up there. What did you say?
You sound like a judge. He's saying last time he heard an accent like yours, he got 5 years.
Oh, mate.
You sound like a judge.
You know.
So
it's a shame that not more upper class people are based and red pilled like me. It really is a shame. I mean, it's just terrible on the circuit. I can't find anybody who's cool. Who's
I mean, Prince Harry is definitely blue pilled, and ironically he used to be red pilled. It's so terrible. I knew a chap who was at school with him. He was he was much older, 4 years older than him, a guy called Harry Hayden Payden. Interestingly, he's in The Crown. He plays Elizabeth's private secretary, Martin something or other. And he's also in, what's that thing called, that awful thing, Downton Abbey. And he knew Prince Harry, and by all accounts, Prince Harry was, he was a laugh. He was fun.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. No, I used to go on holiday to Cornwall. We used to go every year down to Rock. You must have been there, right? Padstow area. Well, anyway, Rock. It's a popular holiday spot for all the public school people, and the princes would go down as well, and they'd be surfing at Poolseth Beach and stuff. So yeah, people knew Harry around there. I don't think I ever met him directly, but you go to a bar and he'd be there or whatever. I'd be a bit too young to get in, so it would vary. But anyway, he was known as a lad. He was a lad. He was fun, and everybody liked him. And William was the sensible one and kind of boring. That was what people would say. But he has turned into a total cuck, hasn't he? I mean, the submissive body language around his wife is very depressing and awkward to see. And I don't know who is buying into this when they're together. Who really likes this dynamic? I think it's political ideology first. Mixed race couple in the royal family. Hooray! Progress! And that is just that's the blinders are on. Because go on.
Yeah, all I can think is that Prince Harry is very interested in and knows how best to get, and that is through being overtly blue pilled, and that's all I can do.
I don't know. I know. I hope he's not watching, because he sometimes does watch my stuff. But I know a guy who's very submissive to his wife, gives her a lot of gifts, does a lot of stuff for her. Total gold digging whore he's got himself, awful woman. And it's a real tragedy to see such a good guy do that with his life, just go for this just trash woman. And he doesn't get blowjobs. I know this for a fact. No blowjobs, despite the gifts, despite all the treats, all the travel, everything he buys, are the vacations, the nice hotels, the 5-star restaurant, Michelin star stuff. No blowjobs. So I think the people who do less get more somehow. Treat them mean, keep them keen. I think that's the oldest truism in the book there. Not necessarily be a bastard to your wife, but I think the guys that let their wives walk all over them, they're not giving him a blowjob. Why do they need to? They're already getting everything they need.
Oh, okay. Somebody says, where did I get my tankard from? It was a birthday present from my friend. So I'm guessing somewhere in Oulu, some secondhand shop must have got it. We have good news from Rachel C, $10. And she says, currently 16 weeks pregnant. Huzzah. Another Jolly Heretic listener to be arriving in the world in April. That's excellent. I'm very pleased to hear about that. Ed, what was the title of the video where you do Does Seem to Live? If you go in there, it's the one with the image of the globe of the world that says the world according to Ed Dutton. It's that video. I can't remember the title. It's like a pint of based bitter with Taleb or something. Lee Garfield says, Tell Hugh to put a wig on because I think he sentenced me. Oh yes, okay. This is the Hugh as a judge again. So this is. I like
this gag. This could go on. I'll be the judge.
Yeah, you'll be the judge of that. I guess it's time to. I should say that the sentence of the court is that on Monday you will come to the Jolly Heretic, where I will answer on my own the very long list of questions I have that I haven't done yet from today and also from last Monday. And I've researched ones from last Monday. I'll research them today and I'll have a long list of those questions and I will do all of them. And so I will see you on Monday at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. in New York. And I would like to thank you very much for staying up at an absurdly late time to come on the Jolly Heretic. I wish I didn't have to end it. It's been great fun talking to him. And I hope to see him again IRL when this current nonsense is over. And Hugh, anything you'd like to wrap up on?
I'm doing a Three Stooges next week with Dan the Iconoclast and Chris Dangerfield. So that will be announced at some point on Telegram if you follow me over there. Or any of those guys, we will announce it. So that'll be a fun show next week. That's all I have to say. There's no point in subscribing to my YouTube, I suppose. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will post content again soon. And maybe do a Scansa Forum speech next year. That might be in the works as well. So we'll see.
Might be. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had what's happening with that. But okay, I will see you all on Monday. Thank you, Hugh. And